Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of Mondays with Mooch. Today, I got my buddy Zach Fishnets here with me. He used to sing in the band that we started together back in, 2001 or so, 2001.
It's
Um,
2000.
yeah, and so we'll talk about, we put out some albums, we toured together, we did some pretty fun stuff. So we thought it'd be cool to get on here and just kind of BS and reminisce about the old days. So this is Zach. Say what's up, Zach.
How's it going, everybody?
And we were just talking before we started recording about how we got the name Fishnet. So Zach, you want to tell everybody why we came up with this ridiculous nickname for you?
I should have brought the shirt up. I actually have it downstairs still. But that just came from a fishnet, a black fishnet shirt that I wore. Not even wore all the time. I just wore it sometimes and like hang out with you guys. I think it was Little John probably that started calling me that
It
first.
was.
And
With a name like Zach or whatever, there's always a big Zach and a little Zach.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you had to be creative, and this Zach liked to wear heavy metal fishnet shirts or punk shirts, and the name stuck. And it was pretty funny because, you and I have done a lot of different things together outside the band stuff. And I think one funny story is when you and I started riding Harleys. I thought Zach had a ride, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, up until he hit a car, but that was on him, not on me. And then we went to another club, or a biker clubhouse one day, and I introduced him as, "Oh, this is my buddy Fishnets," and I did not go over well, did it?
Oh yeah, and like everybody, like no one could get it right. I'd show up and I'd be like, "Hey, fish guts, fish hook, fish nuts."
Fish
Like,
stick. Someone called you fish stick. I remember that one. And they, that old school biker mentality too. They're like, they go, "We won't call anyone fishnets. That's what ladies wear on their legs."
Yeah.
They also got mad that we called each other buddy, so just couldn't win in that group.
Or said, "Sweet dude."
Oh yeah, oh, dude. I remember this is my buddy Fishnets. He's a sweet dude, and it got all quiet. He goes, "We don't call people sweet dude around here." I forgot all about that.
Or when I first came up, it might have been like a barbecue at one of Jeremy's old places, and one of the old biker dudes were there, and I came walking up. He looked at Jeremy and was like, "The fuck is that?" He was like, "Oh, that's fishnets." He was like, "Oh no," he goes, "What the
What's
fuck?"
A fishnet? He goes, "What's a fishnet?"
And then by the end of the night, he was like my best bud.
Yep, I remember that too. So you and I met at the coolest of places ever, right? The Hot Topic.
Yeah,
So
we were.
When I first moved to Portland, I was working in the mall at Hot Topic, and I think it was not long after that you got hired, right? Like I hadn't been there very long.
Yeah, so because I had moved here in the summer of 2000, and I was 20 years old, and I had a job at Shea What on Alberta there washing dishes, and that lasted for like maybe a month before I just was a slacker and
right.
Get out of here. And right around that same time, I got hired on for like the season at Hot Topic, and that was where I had met you. You were already working there, and my first day, I think I met you there, and was you had like I just the first thing I remember thinking was like, wow, this guy, because you were only 19, I didn't know that, but you looked my age or younger, and I was like, this guy's got a lot of tattoos for such a young person.
Right.
For as long as I've known you, you've always seemed covered in tattoos.
Well, I'm glad it worked out. Yeah, I think I got out of jail in mid-July, and moved to Portland right after. And I think that was my first job after moving there. But yeah, I just remember you coming up and I'm like, "Hey, are you a skinhead?" It's like, "Yeah." And you're like,
"Yeah,
cool, what's up?" And that was it. And I think we've probably only been hanging out. Man, was it even a week before we went to that Rancid concert? It was like
it was like within that week, like we started hanging out, and like you said, I came up and asked you if you were a skinhead, and you were like, "Yeah," and like I told you, like, "Yeah, I just moved out here. I want to start a band or something like that," and you were like, "Let's start a band. Let's fucking do it." And then we started hanging out.
A funny story about that is, for those of you that don't know, back in Portland, I was in a skinhead gang, and apparently Zach had been warned about this gang before he met me, and they were like, "Stay away from them. They're violent. They're crazy. Whatever you do, don't hang out with them." And within a week of meeting Zach, I had half the gang in his van going to Seattle on a road trip to go see Rancid.
I had been warned outside a convenience store by my house that one morning I was going to get beers. Actually, it was the morning maybe even. No, it wasn't the morning of that we were going to see Rancid, but I was out there anyway, and I ran into this other punk rock dude, and I was like, yeah, I'm hanging out. I met this dude, Justin, and blah, blah, blah. And he hangs out with the Rose City Bobber Boys. And he was just like, whoa. That's when I got the words, like, be careful, man. Those guys are pretty dangerous. And then, like you said, next thing I know, you and me are going up to see Rancid. Did I come and pick you guys up at your house?
Yeah, probably.
I think the first thing that happened was I came over to your house when you weren't even in the gang yet, and
right.
Well, all the other guys were like Little John and Derek lived there. I think maybe Charlie, and like they came downstairs and instantly started tooling on me for being a punk rocker. I had big spiky hair and stuff, and then I just had them in the back of my van and I'm driving them to Seattle.
Yep.
And then we got there and we were underage. And so they were in the bars drinking, and you and me was walking around the streets, and you tried to pick a fight with like anyone that looked at us. And I was like, man, these guys are crazy.
That sounds about right. I do remember getting pretty drunk and not remembering much of the concert.
Yeah. And there was one fight, Little John or Derek, I think, got in some little scuffle when we were in there. And I'm pretty sure actually that night at the Rancid show, this is like the first picture of you and me that ever existed. I took it that night.
I look pretty sober in there. Yeah. Oh, the random shirtless guy behind us.
And then
when we first met, Zach had Starcraft, right? Was your van?
Yep.
And we were all younger guys. We lived in a city that had public transportation, so not everyone had cars. So for a while, Zach was our go-to, drove us around everywhere. And then a good little caveat to that is that when I got my Vespa, riding around thinking we were hot shit on my scooter, I go, Zach, you want to go to the bar? I was like, I can't. The van's broken down or whatever. And I'd go pick him up on my scooter. We'd put on full face helmets to save some embarrassment. But we would be riding around to these bars thinking, we weren't even old enough to get in yet, but we were getting into Satyricon and all these old punk rock bars.
Yep.
We pull up there on the scooter. We both hop off and walk in like we were the business.
Act like we were hot shit, man.
Zero bucks whatsoever.
Banging on each other.
Oh man, if you would have told me that we did that and you didn't know, I'd be like, no way. But we did it. And every now and again, one of us would leave with a girl and the other one would ride home, I guess. But yeah, so like you said, we started talking about music, and you said that you were in a band back home called The Afflicted.
Yep.
And I was I was playing music with some guys from high school. We've been playing like Misfits covers and stuff for all through high school. So invited you over to jam with us, right? And what did you start out at doing? Were you playing bass or something?
I think
you were playing bass.
Maybe at first, and then someone was like, "Why don't you try singing or something like that?" And
yeah, because I just sang.
Yeah,
because I remember Coyle saying, and you came over. I think you played bass once or twice, and you were like, "Dude, why are we playing songs about vampires and shit?"
That's what happened. That was what happened. He was kind of going for like a horror punk thing, and then I remember the first day I sang though, and I don't remember if someone was like, "You should sing or try to sing" or something like that. And I sang, and I kind of started singing like how I used to sing, like in the old, like it was more of a crusty voice. And I remember like immediately no one liked like what I was doing. Like I was just like screechy and like, I was like the only singer. I don't know. Somehow it was like, yeah, well, you're the singer now,
Well, I think it was just we were like, homies kicking it, best buds, and you had been in a band, want to start a band, so whether you sucked or not, we were doing it.
Right.
And then, I do remember when we first said, okay, Zach used to be in a band, so let's hear him, and probably had like three, because at the time, I lived at that house, was like right in downtown Portland. It was like the go-to spot. So we were all young kids. So I think we had 4 roommates at any time. There was like 6 or 7 people there drinking, partying.
Someone hanging around.
And so I remember, I think there was probably 5 or 6 skinheads down there being like, oh, cool, let's check this out. And you started doing that crust punk screeching stuff. And I just remember everyone's like a record skip.
They were like, let's get the fuck out of here.
But we stuck with it. And then another funny part is, so, we worked at Hot Topic together, but you were a seasonal employee. So after the holiday season or whatever season it was, you got let go. And I was still working, and I remember you called me one day to come over and hang out, sit on the porch and drink or whatever. And I was like, dude, I got to go to work. And you were like, fuck that job, man. I go, I don't work there anymore. Why do you? And I was like, yeah, that's right. And I threw it all away right then and there.
But they actually called like days later and asked if you were coming into work.
Right.
You
Like,
were
yeah, you haven't been in a
like,
week. Are you still planning on coming back or?
yeah, and you're like, is Zach hired back? They were like, no, and you were like, I'm not coming back here.
Yeah. Simpler times back then. I don't know how how I got by without a job, but we did it.
We had the porch, man. It was all we needed.
Yeah, we did. So then we decided we were going to start a band. So I think at the time it was just me and you first, right? And then a girl that we worked with at Hot Topic said, "Hey, my husband plays bass, and he was in a band from the Bay Area, and they had moved up here.
Yep,
And he
that was
wasn't,
Ben.
yeah, and he wasn't quite a skinhead or a punk, but he was like a union guy that was in all the cool music and
Kind of
he
looked
fit
like
in
both.
yeah, and he kind of fit in. I mean, he fit in pretty well. Good dude, fit in well. He had some band experience, so I think that's when we started the hunt for the drummer, right?
Yeah, and there was like a rumor going around because I don't even remember if we tried any drummers out. We just heard about this punk rocker named Adam with a white leather
The
jacket.
white leather jacket.
Yeah.
I remember that too. I think we might have met him once, hella drunk, and that's how we remembered the white jacket. Or maybe someone just told us. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I remember like we were on a mission to find this drummer in the white leather jacket because he plays drums and he was down to be in a band.
Yep. And then we found him at like a party or something, right?
Yeah, it was at one of the North Portland parties or something.
Parties.
Yeah, it was a Riot Punk party for sure. So yeah, and I think wasn't he in the Riot Punks?
If he wasn't at the time, was eventually.
Yeah. So we got him, and I think that's where we started, right? Just us.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. And just wrote songs in the basement. Man, our first show was just the four of us, wasn't it? Before we added a second guitar player.
No, because we still had to get our first show. Was with Tony. We didn't have Tony. We still had to get Tony.
Oh, that's right. We added a second singer, a paranoid schizophrenic.
Yeah, and like we really didn't need to. And it's funny. I always look back at this, and I remember Adam specifically was like, I don't want a two singer band. Like people weren't really keen on the idea, but like I came from the East Coast in the '90s, and like every band out there had two singers. My old band had two singers, so I just kind of had it in my head that was the cool thing to do. And
we just thought you were lazy and didn't want to sing that much.
Yeah. and then so we were like, I don't know if we put any like feelers out or what, or if we were just I remember when we met Tony because we were just hanging out at Rocco's Pizza. And me.
He had just moved up here too.
Yeah, and maybe
like that too.
What's that?
I said it was something like that too. Like we had met him like right after he moved up here.
Yeah, he had just gotten in and was hanging over there, and we probably had a few other people with us, but we saw him. We had like a red mohawk and bleached jeans, and we were like, that guy's punk. Let's see what he's about.
And he was a good singer.
You just asked him, you're like, hey man, you ever sing in a band before? And he was like, no. And then he just right there on the street, he just started singing like a whole punk rock song, like belting it out. And we were just like, well, this is the guy,
Right. I'm pretty sure he pulled some lyrics out of his pocket and was like, yeah, I write songs or whatever. There was something where we're like, well, okay.
Yeah.
And then he was good. He was really good at it.
Yeah.
A little hard to control, but he was a really good singer. So yeah, that's where we started, and then
that's
we did
our first lineup.
Yeah, and our first show was a benefit for Smiley.
No. That our first show was at Billy Ray's.
Yep.
Which because I have pictures of that one too. Here's that's the original line. Tony's not in that one, but that's us at Billy Ray's. Ben, Adam, me, and you.
Yep.
And I have a video of that show too. It's great because it's got all the old homies in it and stuff. But we played that show, and me and Adam all of us were under 21, but you and Adam had fake IDs, I guess, or something like that, and I didn't. So remember, I had to hang out outside until we played. I wasn't allowed in in the place, and then Smiley punched somebody, and that was like kind of the thing for our shows for a while. That was the theme.
Well, in the small world about that is, so there was the other band we played with, Positively Negative, was from Seattle. And there was always some sort of, kind of running beef at the time between Portland skinheads and Seattle skinheads. So they showed up with a skinhead. And I think, he got the typical, what's up, homeboy, where you from? And he got stocked up. Well, it turned out he was actually visiting from New York, right? New York City. And when we were on tour with Monster, was it Monster Squad, that tour? one of the times we were in New York City, we were at Hardcore Tattoo, which is where we always went when we were in New York City. But we were there hanging out, and Frank from Step Too Far and Stigma were like, "Hey, what's up, man? Yeah, you know my homeboy." And he walked up, and I was like, "Huh?" And he goes, "Yeah, you guys beat me up back in Portland." And I'm like, "Man, this sucks." Like, here we are in his town in New York City, but the dude was hella cool, and it was super nice, and we ended up kicking it most of the night. But small world stuff there, because I was like, "Yeah, that was our very first concert." He's like, "Cool, I was the first one to get hit at one of your concerts."
And he wasn't the last.
Definitely was not the last. I was just telling a story the other day about how I gotten beat up by Pan like right before a concert one day. I think it was the Casualties. It was like a sold out show, right?
Yeah, it was the only show that we played with Bombo on drums, I think, and it was like the first time we played for a sold out crowd at the Paris.
It was a rad show. But right beforehand, one of my friends beat me up pretty good, and when he was hitting my head off the brick wall, I put my hand up and he broke my thumb, and that's why it looks like a big toe. Remember? But the bone was sticking out, and remember we like. When we went to the pizza place and we just were like taping it and wrapping it, and we had like layers of paper towels on it. And of course, the minute I started playing, it all just slid off. And so like
you there blood all over. And you were playing that whatever that what was it, like you had like a red Ibanez or something like that back then?
Peavy, buddy. That was the Peavy. That was my first guitar ever.
And I remember there was blood like flowing all over that thing. And but it was like that was like the first show I remember being like, whoa, like people like us kind of thing. And we were like having a great time on stage, I remember. And we're stoked on the crowd. And then that somebody spit on you, that some kid spit on you in the crowd.
That punk rock kid.
Yeah. And you called him out and you were like, don't spit on me again or I'll see you out front or something like that. And after the show,
I did.
After the show, we were out front. We were in the crowd of people, and that guy came up and was mouthing off. And I remember you like probably reached right across me. As I remember, I have so many memories of this in my life, seeing your fist fly across. And I remember just hit him right in the face, and like the blood from your hand and the blood from his nose just went like. Poof. And
I remember that it hurt me really bad. Yeah. I do recall that. I think from playing the show and everything, and it was such a, like you said, it was such a great show. I was like adrenaline, cloud nine. Yep. I probably forgot all about the fact my thumb was broken, but that brought me right back to reality real quick.
Yeah.
And so then I was going to talk about, so we were talking about before we got on some of our releases, some of our albums, and you brought up our first record. So one of the guys in Rose City in our old crew, his name was Charlie. He decided he wanted to start a record label. On Charles In Charge Records, right? And I'm pretty sure he paid for us to record, right?
Yeah, because they're at a CD folder somewhere.
He had a hookup with a recording studio
with that guy. I can't remember his name. Gary, yeah. And because we recorded 2 demos there, remember? Yeah. And Charlie put those out, and then the 7-inch here. Yeah,
and so cool story about all of that really is, first of all, you guys don't understand, this was, like we said, early 2000s. So there was no internet for promoting music. If you wanted people to listen to you or check you out, you made a what we called a press kit, which was like a picture of us, some accomplishments, and then a demo, which back then was either a cassette tape or a CD. And you just played it for people and mailed it everywhere. And the goal was to get on a record label, not necessarily because it was, the best part about it was the distribution. If you were on a good label, they'd put you on tour, and then they would get your CDs everywhere. And so we were out recording demos, trying to get a record label or get a record deal, when Charlie hooked us up with that first 7-inch, right? Something around that.
Well, and then not with the 7-inch, or that's probably what happened. I'm sorry, but just to interject, because I'm not on this 7-inch.
Right. That's what I was going to get at. This was right around the time we started taking the band pretty serious. And when I say serious, I guess you'd have to be in the band to know. But we pretty much ran it like a gang, man. We practiced every day.
Yep.
If you miss practice, you likely got punched in the mouth.
There was a good chance being in this band you were going to get punched.
Yeah. I was bold. But we all took it very serious. So when I say every day I'm serious, we practiced pretty much every single day.
Especially when we lived together. Yeah, I can remember, even if we didn't practice, you and me would sit around and write a song or something,
Yeah, and at one point, the entire band lived together. We rented a 3-bedroom house with 6 people living in it, converted the basement to a practice studio, and that's when we all started hating each other. Really. We were here. We were touring several months out. We were on the road for a month or two, home for a month or two. We were touring so much, and then when we were home, we were all living together. So you can imagine how that when you're in your early 20s. But my point was, so we were taking this band really seriously, and that's when Zach decides he's moving home, back to Connecticut, right?
Yeah, I went back, but there was like the two reasons why I left was like I was one, like the one big reason, because and you weren't there, but you remember how like freaked out I was by it when like that raid happened at my friend's house in Northeast Portland at the time, and like a bunch of people went to jail, and like me and Slug, like everyone's houses were under surveillance and stuff like that, and so it just kind of gotten like our little punk scene at the time had gotten real paranoid. People weren't trusting each other. There was like all this talk of people going to jail. It just got real kind of hairy around here. And so I kind of wanted to get out away from that. And there was talk. I was talking to my old band, The Afflicted. We were talking about getting back together. And I think we were talking to Rodent Popsicle about maybe putting out another 7-inch. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go back east and try to do that. Right. And I did.
Well, and at one point we were like, I was looking at going into school up there with you. I was trying to go with you. I think Adam was on board with moving out there. At one point, I think we were just going to relocate the whole band, or as much of us as we could, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so Zach ended up leaving, and I can't remember if had we already booked the tour, or was it like, who knows?
I think you guys had booked it afterwards, and like I think, and I asked Adam Vick if he would be interested in taking my place.
And we listened to his band, and there were some similarities as far as style goes. And looking back, not really, but at the time we thought so, right?
Yeah, he was a cool dude.
Yeah. Well, and so, another cool thing about that, like we were talking about earlier, is, nowadays, hop on social media, promote your band, book a couple concerts. But back then, you had to directly call a venue or a promoter. You had to send them a press kit. You had to make your own flyer. So like if I booked a show in Philadelphia, I had to make a flyer at the Kinko's in Portland and mail, dozens of them out there. It's just crazy to think about how different it all is, because we really put in a lot of work. There was a book called Book Your Own Life, which was essentially like a phone book of promoters, and you would just look up the city and it would say, there's this venue and this promoter and these people are cool to crash at their house. And it was pretty much for, punk bands or DIY type stuff. And I would call these promoters and I think when I booked that tour, I think I was living at home with my grandma, because I remember she'd be like, everyone had landlines. So I remember she'd be like, Justin, there's a promoter on the phone.
I know. Well, it's still funny. Like if you look at old like 7 inches and like flyers and stuff from the 90s and early 2000s, you'll see like the 7 inches, like my old band, The Afflicted, like has like my mom's address in it. You know what I mean? Like for contact information. And I remember like if you look at old flyers like in Boston or something like that, it would be like, oh, if you're coming from the north, it would have directions written down on the flyer,
drawn in the corner. Like And what's really cool too, you can kind of tell the era that flyers were made now, because you look back and everything was cut and paste, right? Like bands would do individual letters or whatever, however you did it, but everything was cut and pasted, and you can look back and see, okay, we put a background and then we just glued our names over everything.
It didn't even really matter how good it looked. You just had to have it. If you're like, oh, I don't have the band's logo, I'll just draw one real quick,
Yeah, and any of you guys that follow me on social media, I think I have a whole album of them on my Facebook, but I might have some on Instagram, and I'm sure Zach has stuff up there too. But yeah, that stuff was cool. So we booked this. So Zach's gone. We got a new singer. We booked this and never been on the road ever. Been a band for like a year. And we booked a full U.S. tour. And because we're young and super intelligent, right? Our drummer was fixing up this like 1980s Econoline.
Was that the Twinkie?
No.
The yellow van, or was that the brown one?
This was prior to either. It was Adam Vick's blue one.
Blue one, that's right.
Midnight. That on our very first day of tour broke down between Portland and Medford. So I think we ended up playing that show. We played Northern California. We got all the way. We had issues along the way, but pretty much until we got to outside Austin, Texas. We got pulled over by the police, by the welcoming Texas Police Department. They're well known for their hospitality. And, they see a bunch of punk rocks, dudes with big colored hair and everything. So we got searched and frisked, and then they took everything out of the van and left it on the side of the road and then left. So we had to pick up, and we were running super late, and I think we were like a half an hour from the venue, and our van literally caught fire and burned to the ground. Well, the front part of it burned, so we were stuck. And that's when we ended up staying there for, I think, like 2 months. I know I was there for at least 2 months.
Yeah, because I was still around that. Because I remember, like, we stayed in touch. I was in Connecticut. It didn't work out. Like, as soon as I got back there,
weren't we gonna play with the Afflicted or something? Yeah.
Yeah, there was a show booked at the LNG, and we were both supposed to play together. And I remember, like, and then you guys didn't make it. And I, like, as soon as I arrived in Connecticut, like, I instantly got this feeling like, oh, I made a mistake. I should have stayed,
Right.
And so not long after that, like, I was only there for 3 months, and then I was planning, and then I drove back east and at that time you were still, the rest of the band had left, I think, and you were the only one that was still left in Austin.
Yeah, because we were thinking about maybe you picking me up. I know my dad at the time was driving a truck, so I'll see if maybe he would pick me up. I know. So essentially, we're a bunch of young kids. We're broken down in Texas. Thankfully, our homies in Complete Control, Strap-Ons, and the Crumb Bums let us stay at their house.
And that was how we became great friends with those guys.
Super tight, like to this day. And I know you see a lot of them more than I do, but even as far as just staying in communication, just amazing dude. Yeah. So this band we were supposed to play with the night that our show got canceled and opened up their house to us, our whole band stayed there. Like I said, I was there for almost 2 months. And essentially what had happened, since we were all, poor kids, and I would love to say working class, but we didn't even have jobs. We couldn't afford to get home. So we just, lower class brats and a bunch of cool bands got together, and we just kept playing local Austin shows till we had enough money. And one at a time, like homeboy would get on a bus ride home, or next guy would take the bus home. And we kind of just did it one at a time. And thankfully, I think I had a newer equipment from Guitar Center, and I returned it, and they shipped it home to me. So I didn't have, but I remember taking a Greyhound bus from Austin, Texas, back to Portland, Oregon. I think it was 2.5 days with my guitar, and that was awful. But the experience in Austin. What's that?
What did Tony do?
I want to say he was one of the first ones to leave. Well, Brian was the first one to leave because his parents got him home.
Right.
Man, I'm pretty sure. I know Tony took the bus. I can't remember how we sold it. Like, so this was what circles back to that album. So we left for that tour with that record, and we had just come back from the pressing plant, so we didn't even have album covers for it yet. So between Portland and Austin, we're just selling a record with no cover. And then when we got down there and we were stuck, I remember there was a artist there that drew up that logo for us. That's on. Do you have that record?
Yeah, it says Dead Boy is the artist name.
Yeah. So he drew this cool logo up for us, and we went to Kinko's and just printed a ton of them, and just we'd go all the record stores and try and sell the records and sell them at the shows, and any money we made was enough to get a ticket and get a guy home, and next to get a ticket and get a guy home. And I think, like you said, I think we ended up back in Portland close to around the same time. So
I remember we got back there and hooking up, but I don't remember exactly how it was all planned out or what. I remember, like, the transition of me being back in the band. Adam almost didn't want to let it go for a while. Like, it was kind of like an iffy thing.
Didn't Adam stay for a little bit and Tony left, or was that just Canada? That's just to get into Canada.
No, what we did is we just ended up, like, we played one final show where all of the singers took turns. So he sang his songs, and that was his last show with the Escaped. I think it was at Granite Skidmore, actually, a basement show.
So didn't he do Canada with us or no?
Nope, that was me and Carter.
Oh, Carter. Yeah, we had Carter by then. That's where I got confused. Yeah, so eventually, I think it was Compton where we parted ways with Tony, right?
Yeah, I came back, rejoined, and it was me and Tony again. And that was when things started to really gain momentum. We had that song Antisocial, and that was like our first song that people like could remember and sing along to. And like, it started to be like, oh, the Escaped are kind of a cool band or whatever. And,
then we put out the first actual album.
Yeah. And then I think we did, like, we never did a U.S. tour with Tony. I think we did like maybe 2 West Coast or 1 West Coast and a bunch of Northwest tours with him. And
yeah, because I do know one of our next tours was with our friends from Texas. So we became such good friends that when we got back together, we ended up doing that Monster Squad and Strap-Ons tour, Complete Control, whatever they were calling themselves at the time, right?
No, we toured with the Strap-Ons, but the Monster Squad tour was a separate tour. Like we didn't tour those bands at the same time. And I think Tony,
that's right. That's right. That's
Tony came on the Strap-On tour.
We had the yellow van that also broke down.
Yes. And I think that actually, right. And that was where the Strap-Ons tour was where we met Monster Squad, because we broke down in
back outside of Vacaville, but we had known them before that because they came up and played. So there was that. I can tell you the story. We didn't know them yet. We knew the guy. Well, we knew like some of their friends, but right. That's what I was thinking. What was that skinhead band that we played with? They came up and we played the cover band with them, The Abuse. Yeah. So we met them through The Abuse, right?
No, it was I think we met The Abuse through them, maybe, because it was we had on that tour. We didn't take two vans on that tour. No, that was the one with Dylan. So on that tour,
different one. Yeah.
Or did we take that one?
We had the yellow van and the white van with our equipment in it.
The equipment in it. Okay, and Dylan was on that tour. That's right. Dylan was playing bass on that tour, and Ben was the one. We broke down and we stayed at that guy's house from Pressure Point.
Oh yeah, Eric.
And we had to leave his house, and so Ben, our ex-bass player, was like, "Hey," and that was when me and Jeremy, because we were driving the minivan with the gear, and Brad from the Strap-Ons were kind of like we were separated from your group, and so you guys were like stuck somewhere all day, and we hit up down. Phil, and the three of us drove to Vacaville, and that's where we first met Phil, and he gave us all free tattoos and barbecued for us.
That's right. And that was how we met guys. We broke down. We just bought that van from the fire department, a huge 15-passenger van, got it all dialed, was super comfortable. And Adam, I think it was Adam was still playing drums then, right? Yeah. Adam put motor oil in the transmission, and we had to drop or vice versa, transmission in the oil. I just remember we had to drop the pan. So we were like in front of a AutoZone all day, and then the van still ended up not working out for us.
And we were chilling the whole time, where you guys were like
not chilling.
And I remember because everyone was pissed at the end of the day.
But yeah, so then we put out the Escape Generation on Road and Pop. So because due to you being from the East Coast and being in a band, you knew the guys from Toxic Narcotic pretty well. And because for a while we had a pretty good like Boston Portland connection, because we were playing with like the Prophets. We were playing with a lot of Boston bands, right?
I feel like a lot of our best shows, like on tour anyway, were in Boston. We always played a lot of great shows there.
Boston and Austin were like my two favorites for sure.
Absolutely.
And Austin, a lot of it, like we said, because we'd already had developed a lot of relationships. And then same with Boston. Like I said, I think, when any of the Boston bands came to Portland, we put on a good show, and then vice versa. And I think
we just kind of fit in the Boston scene. We were a punk and skinhead band. We were kind of like violent, we had a hardcore and punk rock kind of vibe going for us, I just feel like we were welcomed there pretty
for sure
right off the start,
And Toxic Narcotic was kind of a hardcore punk band. I mean, a little different style, but similar. And Bill, their singer, was a rad dude. Also rode motorcycles. I actually remember probably one of the first guys in that scene that we met that was really riding motorcycles, just to kind of it wasn't Bill, it was the guitar player, and then Bill ended up getting like a Honda Shadow.
Will was the guitar player. That guy was intense.
Yep. Yeah, Will was the one that was riding motorcycles. But anyway, so he ended up putting out our first album, the Escape Generation album. And we put a music video from a live show on there, which is actually a lot of it came from that one with Bombo, I think, the Casualty show, right?
Yep.
And I was trying to think, so what are some of the big bands that we played with, or bands that we think were cool?
Well, I mean, it was like we definitely got lucky, and like we just kind of mentioned a little bit, not only did we get to play with a lot of bands, but like we became friends with and like good friends with a lot of bands that like prior to them being friends, we were just fans. You know what I mean? It's like, that's cool. And like you said, we're still friends to this day. I think some of the more memorable, like bigger bands that we played with would be like, or for me anyway, was kind of like the old school legendary bands. Like Broken Bones was definitely one of my favorite shows that we did. UK Subs was awesome. I can't
remember. Reunion shows with Conflict. That was a pretty big one. Never
got
into
them. Cool.
Big one.
Yeah. We did get to play with a lot of the. I mean, we got to play with a lot of like, even if it was bands that I wasn't into. We still played with a lot of old school bands that were cool. Like I think we played with Dayglow Abortions, that's Satiricon, and
yeah, we did
stuff like that. And then of course, just like any of like
we played with DOA and Ben too. Remember?
Yeah.
Remember we ate their food tray.
Yeah, we had a food fight with their vegetable plate.
Yeah. I remember they came in and were like, where's our food at? And they just kind of looked at us. We're like, nah.
Oh, and we played with DI down in San Diego that time, and that was really cool. I remember that because that was another band that like I never listened to, but I remember really that like what the cool thing for me that night was because like I grew up watching Suburbia, and they're like the second band to play in that movie, and so when we were sitting backstage, I'm hanging out with the singer, and he's telling me stories and stuff, and he's talking about like the Richard Hung Himself song, and I'm like, cool, I grew up watching this guy in that movie, and now I'm hanging out with him right now. And that used to happen a lot, which was cool,
And then, a lot of bands that we were friends with and now we're even closer friends with, but guys, so we played with The Unseen, Global Threat. We played with The Casualties a lot. And then obviously being from Portland, Poison Idea, Defiance. I mean, we played with some really cool bands looking back on it. Lower Class Brass, like I said, The Riffs, from that era, those were good sized bands. They were
or even, and we played with some of like the cooler, like more hard, like or raw, like underground bands from back, at least around this time or around that time, like Blood Spit Nights and Skull Splitter and stuff like that. That were cool.
Even Tragedy.
What I was just gonna say, I just remembered one of my favorite shows we ever played was that show it was at the house on Grand and Skidmore, and it only happened there because we moved that show. We were supposed to play at the the Red and Black Cafe that night, remember, with Tragedy, Midnight, and Dead by Dawn, and the show got canceled that night, and you and me went back and forth to the show. Everyone was calling, like everybody letting people know it changed, and you and me were shuttling people. Anyone that was at the Red and Black show, we would bring them to the house show because it got relocated that night. And I remember you and me just being like, man, I don't think this is going to suck because the word's not going to get out. And we got to that house and it was just packed and every band ripped. And that show might have actually even been my 22nd birthday. It
was a birthday show.
We all went back to my house and partied that night.
Yep. And then I think two shows that really stand out to me that were not a good mix was Terror, which was, I remember, where were we when I stole that CD? Was it New Mexico?
Yeah. That when we played with Caustic Christ and Municipal Waste in that little record store.
Yeah, so we were playing with Municipal Waste, and I remember we were in a record store, and we were leaving. Someone pointed out that they had this like big white power music section. And so
they had like a Rahowa record and stuff?
Yeah, remember? And so I remember me saying something to the record store guy, and he's like, well, whatever sells. And we were like, oh, yeah. So then we just started stealing stuff.
That's right. That's right. I forgot.
And the album I stole was Terror, Lowest of the Low, because some of the guys that we knew were kind of listening to him, but I don't think we'd heard him yet.
Yeah.
And that's one of those moments, I'll tell you, I remember putting that CD in the van with all of us, and every one of us just being like, whoa, these two.
Yeah. They were awesome.
Like we played that album out.
Yeah.
But I remember, so we were stoked to play with them. And, we were that band that was kind of like too hardcore for the punk kids, too punk for the hardcore kids, depending where you're at. Terror's a full-blown hardcore band. So I just remember we were staying there playing, and, we were going live. We had a lot of energy. And I just remember all the hardcore guys just standing there. You remember that? It was like man. Nobody moving. Everybody just staring at us.
It happened to us in Jersey when we played with Harley's War, too.
Oh, yeah. That was
another cool thing
that we played
with. We got to hang out with Harley and stuff.
We were covering Hard Times that whole tour, and we were asking us to play. But also, funny note is, remember, we were warned that Harley was a dick, and that just kind of steer clear of him. A lot of people didn't like him, and he was rad to us. Remember, we couldn't find our drummer Chris. It turned out he's in the van smoking weed with Harley, and I'm not putting him on blast for that. But we always like thinking, man, everyone said this. He was this like scary. I mean, I know what he's about. We all know his history, but man, coolest guy. That was a crazy show. And in Boston, when we were playing for Bridge 9 Records, we were trying to get on Bridge 9. They didn't care for us.
Awesome.
Great show.
That's right.
They didn't care for us.
I remember we left that show thinking, man, we got it tonight. Like
that was one of the best live shows we played. Like we were all together. Energy was great. We were playing with For the Worse. McCarthy bit some dude's ear off that night, right?
Yeah.
So those were awkward. And then the funniest one was that band, The Matches. You remember that one in New Mexico?
Oh, that's right, dude.
They were like a really
they were like a
hipster.
Hellcat band or something at the time.
They were on Epitaph, and they were like a hipster pop punk folky. I don't know how to describe
that
it.
white kid with a big afro or something, right?
They had a ton of money. They showed up in like a full on tour bus, and so
that was when
all these
Coleman
like
was playing with us.
Yep. It was his birthday, I think. But so we pull up to that show, and it's like all like, you know, emo scene essentially, or even worse. It was like the weird, like preppy. I don't even know how to describe it.
It wasn't even like a real venue, was it? It was like a restaurant or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like it was a weird situation.
I mean, it was crowded, but I remember we went hard and I think we played really well, but we went really hard, and same thing.
Nobody liked it.
It was like crickets. And I remember when the Matches took the stage, they go, "Let's give it up for the Escape. They scared the shit out of us." I was like, hell yeah. That was the best takeaway, dude.
Yeah.
You know, another cool, like Bloody Sods became great friends of ours. You know, playing with them in Atlanta. That's where, I guess, so then our second album was on Blackout Records, who had some pretty major releases. I mean, that was a step towards a pretty big band, you know, pretty big move for us. And right around that time, so like Zach said, we ended up meeting a lot of people we looked up to. Is we went and saw Rancid. And funny caveat to this show is that I was 86th from that venue. And who was it? It was like me and Tom were 86th, or it was me and Twitch were on the flyer for being 86th. And then Tom and Jeremy, my twin brother, we got in, and then those two got banned because they thought they were us. But I remember, like, just cheesy, like we put together a press kit, remember, and stuffed it in like a manila envelope. And we were just going to do that fanboy stuff. And I remember that Lars and Tim were getting into a taxi cab. And I just remember grabbing Lars and being like, "Hey, check this out," and never thought a thing of it, right? And what was it, a month later, he called you?
Yeah, and I remember, like, because we forgot, you know, there was no, like, we're waiting or anything, you know, it was like out of there. And yeah. And our friend, it was like one morning too, or something like that, maybe noon. And it was when I lived over on 9th and Skidmore, and I was like just hanging around or whatever. And the phone rang, and it was our mutual friend, Kristen. And she was like, "Hey, is it okay if I give your number to someone? Lars Fredrickson is looking for your number." And I was like, "What do you mean Lars Fredrickson, like from Rancid?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "He's looking for my number." And I'm like, "Okay, give Lars Fredrickson my number." Right? And literally like 2 minutes later, the phone rings, and on the
caller ID,
this is Lars Fredrickson. I'm like, "What the? This has got to be a joke." And I answer the phone. I'm like, "Hello," and he's just like, "Hey, is Zach there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, this is him." He's like, "Hey, man, this is Lars from Rancid." He's like, "You sing for the Escape," and that's what I was just like.
Yeah, well, remember he had tried to track us down. So very first cell phone days, right? And you know, typical me, I hadn't paid my cell phone bill.
Yeah, this was my house line.
Our press kit had my cell phone number on it, and I was like on those. I had one of those like Nokia phones that lit up, you know. That's how back in the day it was. Yeah. And it was shut off. So I guess he was trying to call it, couldn't get a hold of me. So he was interested enough that he's made phone calls to track us down. So we thought that was a pretty big deal. And we talked with him back and forth a lot because there was a lot
of to call a lot just to shoot the shit.
Yeah, and I remember, you know, there was a lot of like, "Hey, we might try this, we might try that." Initially, he had said he was going to produce the record for us, and then, you know, how everyone that knows me knows that I'm an impatient and impulsive dude, so we just kept pushing forward with recording without him. But we ended up getting the album done, and I don't think, you know, they weren't sure yet, so that's when they were going to float it on to Give 'Em the Boot, kind of see how it went.
Yeah.
So we ended up being on that Give 'Em the Boot 4 comp, which with one of our better songs. But at that time, that's when we were in talks with Blackout Records. And essentially, I think Bill was like, "Well, it's not a big risk. You guys already paid for the recording." So Bill put out our record, but then actually got us on some good tours. That's when we were, you know, we had some fun tours with Blackout too. And I remember both of those, you know, back in the day, the size of the record labels we were on were not making money. There was no advances. But they would, a lot of times they would like front us a bunch of CDs to sell on tour. They would help us out in that way. And I remember like when we were in Boston and we parked in the towaway zone, we were standing out front of that bar partying and with Bill from Toxic Narcotic, and all of a sudden we see our van go by on the back of a tow truck, and Bill had paid to get us out of Impound. And saying, I remember.
Oh man, I totally forgot about that. Yeah. That's right, dude.
Remember, we were just standing there going, because our van was hooked up to our trailer with literally all our equipment, all of our merch, everything. They were just
Oh man.
So we had good times in Boston, man. Jeremy kicked out the window. My brother kicked out the window of our van in the winter there.
How did he do that?
He was drunk in the back seat, and I was picking on him, and he tried to kick me, and he kicked the window out.
Man, I forgot. I remember in Boston, and that guy dump truck.
That's the same night. He spit on dump truck. Yeah. Well, typical for those of you guys that don't know this either. So back then, I didn't really drink back then. And you did a little bit, right? But Tom didn't. Like most of us had a lot of the band didn't drink. So what we did was we get all these drink tickets. And so, Zach or the few guys that drank would drink, but my brother used to come as our roadie and drive, but he would get all my drink tickets. So by the time the concert was over, he would be housed. And so he was zero help. He was that roadie that never loaded equipment, barely sold merch, but he drove. He drove, and he was a good time.
Yeah.
But he also got drunk and picked a lot of fights, and that was one of them.
So there's definitely like many a late night memory I have with like me and Jeremy being like delirious at the wheel together while the rest of the band was asleep. Just like he was good for a long haul for sure, but me and him were also the ones that were always doing the drinking and stuff.
Oh, and I think, when you're young kids, you think you're invincible, you don't know better. And I remember we would push it a lot for driving. And like I said, we booked all of our own tours. So some of them, it would be like, hey, we get done playing and we'd have a 14-hour drive to get to Nashville the next day.
That drive from Boston to Nashville, I think, was 22 hours.
Yeah.
Straight.
And we got there, slept at the venue for like 2 hours, and then got up, and that was a whole different
that was a whole different
thing. We got banned from the city of Nashville, but we'll tell that maybe another day.
That was a great show, though, before all that stuff went down.
It was. And also related to our New York story is the guy that caught the brunt end of it that night. What, we're in Atlanta 3 days later, and all the bloody sods, all these scary kind of hillbilly dudes were like, hey, what's up? And it got all quiet, and they go, like, yeah, my friend Gabe, right? And we looked over, and there he was. Thankfully, we became friends, and he's still a rad dude. I talk to him. I mean, not as often as I used to, but I still stay in touch with him.
That guy was a champ, man.
He was a champ. So that the Rosie Hardcore one, that was a bigger label for us. That was kind of like, hey, we think we might be making something out of this. Like we said, we had that song on the Give 'Em the Boot comp, and then so our first one was 2003. Second one was 2004, and then our TKO Records came out in 2005.
Yeah.
So we were active. I mean, I would say from 2003 to 2005, we were pretty much full-time band, right? I mean, just touring.
Yeah,
I was managing all the time. Yeah, I mean, I was working at the porn store, like, in between or whatever.
Yeah,
I think I pumped gas for a while, like random stuff.
We were all doing like in between, like under the table jobs and stuff like that. I would do landscaping sometimes. I had that weird sex shop that I worked, or club that I worked at for.
Yeah, you worked at that swingers club, and I was doing security at a porn store. We were having a good time. But I remember essentially we'd be gone for like, I think we decided that the longest we could do without hating each other was about 6 to 7 weeks. So we would do, we'd like do a month or 2 months, then we'd be home for a month or 2 months, and then we'd go right back on the road. For a while, we were pushing it really hard. And at that time, that started, pumping out these records. So it looks like, we did an album a year, essentially.
Yeah. And that was definitely, it always felt like we were on the road, because even when we weren't doing like a US tour, then we would do like 3-day little Northwest dates or a 10-day or 7-day West Coast date or something like that, just to be on the road. And I remember that's when it always felt too like we were seeing our friends all the time, because it's like, and plus those bands would be on tour, so we'd run into each other all over the place, and it'd be like Complete Control, Monster Squad, The Virus, Global Threat. Like every one of those bands would be on tour, and we would just see each other all. It felt like we were always hanging out with each other,
No, it was incredible. And if you can think, being early 20s, minimal responsibilities, in a van with your best friends, traveling the country, incredible, man. I mean, even at the times when we thought it sucked, you're looking back on it, we're like, incredible, right?
Incredible, yeah. And and what, we were maybe paying $200 a month for rent back then, like maybe,
know. Once we started having decent shows, paid gigs, essentially, we were paying each other $5 a day, and so at the venue, it was always in our rider or guarantee that we had dinner, so it was usually pizza or something. So we know we at least get fed once a day, and that other $5 back then, not to sound super old, but usually get 2 meals at. We remember we were like kings of the deluxe double stack back when they were 99 cents.
You sell some Tostitos at the gas station, man.
I remember the controversy when the double stack wasn't $1 anymore. It damn near bankrupted us.
Yeah.
But
And there was the Jumbo Yak con queso from Jack in the Box.
Yeah. I mean, we lived off $5 a day back then, you know, and part of the reason I think the other reason that we stayed touring a lot is it was either tour or be home, but we couldn't really do both because $5 a day isn't paying rent, you know. So that's why, you know, we rented a house where we were all together, or some of the guys stayed with friends. And we pretty much just had those jobs to pay rent in between tour, really.
Yeah. And then I would say too, another great thing about the old days, you know, in Portland is it's like we knew everybody. We had friends everywhere. So it's like we used to call it life on the jib, you know, like even if we didn't have money, it's like, okay, we knew who was bartending at the Jockey Club on this night, at SatiriCon at this night, at Shea What on this night. You know, it didn't matter. Like somebody was going to be like, free beer for you guys, free beer for the punks, whatever, you know. And like,
I've been a mooch from day one.
Yeah.
I've been living that mooch lifestyle for a long time.
Oh yeah.
And so I remember with TKO Records, I'm pretty sure we met Mark for the first time in Atlanta when he was still living in Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
And he had helped us book a show, and it had canceled, so we ended up playing a house party, which ended up being cool, I think, because we got to spend a lot of one-on-one time with Mark and really got to know Mark. And
were we on tour with the Heroes on that one? Or was that? Yeah,
I think so. I'm pretty sure we were, because remember he took us to the TKO warehouse and hooked us up with a bunch of CDs.
Yeah.
And but I just remember we really hit it off with him as a friend, you know, and we were friends with Bill from Toxic Narcotic. You know, Blackout was great to us and stuff, but we just didn't have that type of connection really with that Bill. But TKO, man, like Mark was the dude, you know, and at the time they were a big label. They were putting out those Punch Drunk compilations. You know, they signed all those bigger like Skinhead bands. They were doing pretty, you know, Pressure Point. I mean, there was a lot of bands. They were doing really cool stuff, and so to be associated with them was a big thing at the time.
Totally.
Yeah, and that was our last full length came out in 2005, and unfortunately we broke up like almost right after it came out.
Yeah, we didn't get to like promote because we did the last tour we did that, and you weren't with us. We didn't even have it, I don't think. So we like didn't even get the tour on it. We didn't get to promote it or anything.
Well, and that was that Brain Failure tour, and you know, I had been friends with Ken Casey from Dropkick Murphys for years, and I told you a story on how we met. But essentially, I was on the run from the law for a while and followed Dropkick around. But anyways, I became friends with Ken and just stayed in touch back and forth. And man, you know, Dropkick, as you'll remember, they were playing in the basement of the Chinese Tea House back then, so they were just another punk band. Yeah. And he was cool. He always stayed in touch. He was really supportive of the band, helped us out. And he's the one that put us in touch with Brain. He said, "Hey, this band Brain Failure, they're getting some good recognition from Hellcat, and I think was the episode was Hellcat."
Didn't they just finish like they were on tour with Dropkick or the Unseen, and then
something like that? They'd done a pretty major tour, and they still had dates to do. And Ken's the one that suggested us for it. And so yeah, I mean that was really cool. I mean that was the last tour the band did, right? And it was the only one I remember.
Yeah,
we rotated members. We rotated members a lot, so there was a lot of tours where somebody missed it.
Right. There was even like we've talked about. There was a tour because you and me were the only like members who were in the first lineup to the last lineup. But there was a tour without you and a tour without me.
Yep. Yeah, and our guitar player did pretty much all up until that last one. The first 2 albums we had the same guitar player, but he rarely went on tour with us. He was a young kid. Looking back on it, we gave him a hard time then, but looking back on it, he was a young kid trying to go to college and had a girlfriend who has since married.
How was he doing trying to do that stuff, man?
Yeah, he was too young to be doing it. That was probably our problem with him. Remember, his dad wouldn't let him go on tour unless he was on the honor roll. He said, "No honor roll, no rock and roll."
No rock and roll.
Yeah, so I mean, we rotated guitar players often. Then we went through a drummer search, but once we got Chris, he was in for the long haul.
Yeah. And Chris was, he joined and quit school and joined the band.
Yeah, he gave it his all. And then, like we said, so we had that second singer, Tony, for quite a while. And, you know, he was a paranoid schizophrenic and also a pretty heavy drinker and a drug abuser. And there was great guy, and I love the dude to death, but there was times where you know, he wouldn't show up to shows, or he would show up late, or he would be drunk, or he'd leave early. And then there was even some times where, you know, he had some of his schizophrenic episodes. So he's like yelling at people in the crowd or punching people. And I think one time he took our door money. I remember they paid him to give it to us, and he had spent it. And so anyways, I think it became enough issues that although he was a very, very good singer, and I think he fit the band well, it just wasn't making sense for the level that we wanted to be at as far as how often we were playing and touring. And I remember before one tour, we couldn't find him, and it turned out he was in jail because he got tased. Remember?
Yeah.
He was doing graffiti on a Nordstrom window, and he got tased.
Was that in front? Didn't he got tased a couple times, right? Because he got tased in front of like the Yam Hill before.
Probably. I just remember we were like really leaving for tour, and we couldn't find him, and we found out he was in jail, and he was just bailing out or getting out. And I remember he kept going. He goes, "Yeah, man." He goes, "I still got the fluid in my boots." We're like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, I got tased. Still got fluid in my boots." And he goes, "Next girl that takes me on is gonna light up like a slot machine, start spitting out silver dollars." Tony always had some great lines, man. Great lines.
It was probably good old Mabel.
Yeah, you're right. So what's funny is I don't remember what it was the end of a tour. We finished a tour in Los Angeles. We were rounding it up, and Tony was from Visalia, so not quite LA area, but we were down there, and we used to play like Southgate and Inglewood, that whole area. A lot of promoter there that booked us a lot of really cool shows there. And well, you know, Rhino from Unity and the guys, we used to go party with them afterwards. So for some reason, we were in some bad.
What was the Showcase Theater? That was
Showcase was no, the Allen Theater was the one that Allen Theater was the one we played at a lot in Southgate.
Right, yeah.
Showcase is one that was in Corona. Yeah. So, anyways, we ended up saying goodbye to Tony, and we just kind of dropped him off. And I swear to God, we were in Compton or Inglewood. Remember?
And he stepped out. He still had his red mohawk up and water pistol. Yeah,
water pistol. And he said, "This is Anthony Boardwalk signing off." And we honestly thought we'd never see him again.
And he just got out of the van in the middle of whatever ghetto we were in.
Yep, and just took off. So then we were searching for a singer, and we tried out quite a few different people, and we actually Vacaville connection with the Monster Squad and, you know, the family there, met Carter. And as soon as he tried out, I mean, he was the one, dude. That guy.
He was great right away. I remember because we drove down there, the whole band specific, because we went down there to try out Thomas, who was playing guitar for Monster Squad at the time, and that didn't go so well. And then Carter, who had also never sang in a band before, was interested in trying out, and I think we gave him the lyrics to No Pity in Rose City, and he just nailed it. Yeah. And we were like, all right.
At the time, we were on a really good like Bloody Sods kick. They had two singers, kind of you know, and he kind of had that Bloody Sods sound. Remember, I just remember it like everything just kind of lined up.
And when we met him, like he was super like funny and fun to hang out with and stuff. Like it seemed like a good idea. It seemed like
he was super into his grocery store job. I think he was going to work at Kroger till he died or whatever it was, Ralph's, or I can't remember. Anyway,
was it Trader Joe's?
No, it was like a Ralph's. There was it was a union store clerk job. But you know, we're a Portland-based band, so we ended up having to talk him into moving to Portland, and he did. And and then we spent a couple years with him in the band too. I mean, I think he did some of the bigger tours with us, right?
I mean, he did more. Yeah, he did more of this than Tony did. He was because he's on both the he's on Rose City Hardcore and the TKO album, and he did all the tours. All the U.S. tours that we did, he did with us. I don't think we ever did any U.S. tours with Tony, but with Carter, we did a U.S. tour by ourselves. We did one with Monster Squad. We did one with the Wednesday Night Heroes. Then we did the Canadian tour with the Wednesday Night Heroes, which on that one,
probably one of my favorite tours.
That show in Edmonton, in their hometown, was one of the greatest shows that we ever played.
So I have video footage of it somewhere.
Do you really?
Remember I had that little camcorder, and it took the little high 8 video things. And I remember that towards the last couple of tours, I was filming all the time. But I transferred them to VHS, and I don't have the VHS, but I still have the original high 8s. I just have to transfer them to something. The only thing I can't send them in anywhere because I don't know what else is on there. And I don't mean like illegal shit. I'm a young adult with a girlfriend and a camcorder, so I'm sure there's some dumb stuff on there. But I want to pull that footage because I know I have the footage like when I played guitar with Wednesday Night Heroes that night.
Yeah.
I know the other thing that sucks is Matt from Monster Squad was really good at documenting pictures and videos, and he filmed our whole tour, and he mailed us all the tapes of it, and there were the originals, and for some reason they never showed up.
So that's right. You told me about that. That sucks.
Because there was a ton of great footage, man. I mean, he still brings it up. He was kind of apprehensive about mailing it too, and I was like, "Oh, come on, man, it'll be fine," and it just never showed up. And then, so we talked about the albums. We did. We were on a Charged Records compilation because we were good friends with Casualties, and that was Jake's label. And then another cool highlight moment is TKO Records actually was the soundtrack to a porn called "Fuck the System."
Oh yeah, that's right.
With the Rachel Rotten or Bonnie Rotten, or I don't know, it was one of the Rottens. So we had a song on a porn, which was pretty sweet. I still have it somewhere packed in a basement with the rest of my CDs and stuff. But I think that was probably it as far as releases goes, don't you think?
Yeah, we did those comps. Yeah, I think that was it.
And with the way things are now, and like we said, there wasn't really digital music then. But what's really cool now, and I don't know if it's a big thing or not, because maybe everybody's on there, but you go to Instagram stories and you can add music, and we've got our songs are on there, which to me is just cool. Every now, we're on all those platforms now. I don't know where those 1 penny checks go to, but
yeah, I don't know how those got out, because it's like the company I work for, that's what we do. We distribute bands to digital platforms and collect the revenue for them. And I'm like, who put my band on there, and who's getting that dough, man?
Well, the problem, when you're a young kid, and whatever paperwork we signed, imagine what address or phone number that was.
Right.
I lived 100 places since then. I know we owed a lot of money because like the bands or the labels would front us CDs and stuff like that. So I'm sure it's just going in a recouping charges.
Probably. Half the addresses we put down, we probably got evicted from.
Right. So we broke up in late 2005, I believe, and then really I didn't play music at all after that. Pretty burnt out. Just other, life happened, whatever. I actually ended up riding, and that's when I started joining motorcycle clubs. It was actually 2006.
But we did
2006.
Yeah, we started riding right around shortly after the band broke up was when we got motorcycles. So when we came back from that brain failure tour, we did 2 shows. We did 2 shows that weekend, and that was where our last shows. We did a show with Broken Bones and Brain Failure and Total Chaos, I think maybe at the Meow Meow or something. And that was that show that I mentioned earlier, the Broken Bones show. It was a great show. And then I remember Broken Bones played like a house show at remember Chris and Greg and all the young punks had a house together. And so they played a house show there. We didn't play that show, but then we played the Escapes like official breakup show at that house. I don't remember who else played with us. I think like some grindcore bands. I think like Melt Rope played with us or something. But either way, all I remember about that show and Brain Failure, because they were still here. And we played the show. Tony sang with us. Carter didn't do it with us. Because me and Chris took over vocal duties because we did that last tour without Carter. So Tony did the last show with us with me and Chris also doing the vocals for those songs. And all I remember is drinking a lot before that set and like ripping through that set and it being over and all of a sudden being like it's over and you're not even remembering it. You know what I mean?
Right. I don't remember what my last show with the band was because I don't think I played that one.
Oh yeah, it was that show. That was the last official. Yeah, it was the last one that we all did together. And
how good my memory is.
And then whatever. That was that, I guess. I remember being wrong, like, and telling like the guys in Monster Squad and stuff, like them hitting me up, be like, "Did you guys really break up?" Because like back then we were all, we still are, but
right.
Us in Monster Squad and the Chrome Bombs and Complete Control were like always kind of like we were family. We were always playing with those bands. It seems, you know what I mean?
Yeah, what was cool about back then, and I'm sure bands now too, but it was like when we got that Give Them the Boot, we were trying to bring them with us. And when they got this tour, they were like, we were always trying to help each other out.
Always trying to help each other out.
Yeah, it wasn't like a competition. It was like, oh, cool, you got this tour. Okay, can my friends come?
Yeah.
And
so it was a bummer if one was broke up or something, like I remember they were bummed, like, yo, these broke up,
I do want to highlight too. I mean, we played some really cool places. So, growing up as in the punk skinhead scene, there's all these legendary venues that you hear about growing up, and one of them, luckily, is Satyricon, and we were thankful that we grew up there in that area. So, I mean, that was our home away from home, pretty much.
Satyricon,
Even if we weren't playing there, you and I were there,
hanging out
like,
there.
pretty much
To
every
this
Friday or
day,
Saturday, we'd go out front.
to this day, Satyricon, out of like all the places that like I've ever played in any of my bands, is still one of my favorite venues ever. It was just the perfect punk rock fucking hellhole, you know what I mean? And,
Right.
except the sound was always good there for some reason too. Remember, like
It was. And then I believe we played CBGB's twice, or we played once and went there once. I think we played there twice.
No, we played unless you guys. No, yeah, we only played there once. And
we were booked there on that very first tour, and we didn't make it out there.
Yeah.
And then Gilman Street, which, being from the West Coast, and if you're into Rancid or Green Day or Operation Ivy or any of those bands, you've heard of Gilman Street. And that was like a big bucket list item too.
Yeah,
and that was pretty cool.
That was like, I grew up on the East Coast, so that was definitely one for me. That was like a big one to play, because I remember just reading about that and like Rancid and Filth albums and stuff like that. They'd always mention Gilman Street, so that was big for me.
Big deal. And then we played the Warped Tour in Cleveland, Ohio, which was like right outside of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And that was kind of a last minute thing. I think we were on tour with Wednesday Night Heroes, and Gonzo or Rotten John or somebody hooked us up and just got us on. I think
it was a combination of Jake Casualty and Lars actually helped us.
Probably. Yeah, because I know Lars and the Bastards played it, Hazen Street. I mean, that was, it was a huge venue, and I think we ended up playing at the exact same time as Lars and the Bastards, or like right after or something.
No, remember, it was awesome because they were playing, and there was thousands of people there, however many or whatever, and they were playing, and all of us were we were playing on the Ernie Ball stage like after their set, so we were all sitting on the back of the stage watching them play, and like halfway through the set, Lars was like, "Yo, if you guys think you're real punk rock, check out my friends, The Escape." And he even pulled out like a little piece of paper and like mentioned what stage and what time. Because I remember us just being like, dude, we just got the hugest shout out ever. Like that was awesome.
Right. And I remember just hanging backstage at that, after it was over. And if anyone's ever been the Warped Tour, afterwards all the bands get together and barbecue and like party.
Barbecue, yeah, that was fun.
And I remember that's when I had met, or at least saw or met a lot of people we really looked up to. Bad Religion, the guys from Bad Religion.
I have a picture of me and Tom and Brian Baker from Bad Religion and Minor Threat.
Yeah, that was cool. And back then when we were still in the Madball, we're back there hanging with Freddie from Madball and Toby from H2O, and like a lot of guys that we really looked up to back then. So that was an awesome experience too. And then like I said, that Canadian tour was probably one of my favorites. That was a good time. Every show was packed.
And the Wednesday Night Heroes, we definitely got to give those guys props because, they they were great guys. Still one of those bands who are friends to this day. Anytime, if I ever ran into Graham or something right now, or Luke, I'd be
talked to him 2 days ago.
So yeah, I'd be so stoked to see him. And they were a great band, and they really looked out for us on that tour. Like we did a U.S. tour with them, and that was cool. But like they had a good following up there in Canada, and they really like made sure that
big shows. They were big shows. That might have been one of the only tours where we made money.
We came back with a good amount of money on that one. Yeah. Well, I remember because that final show we played in Edmonton, the whole tour, we were like, man, this is great. And they kept saying, wait till we get to our hometown. We were like, okay, cool. We were like, we know what it's like. We have a good crowd in Portland, whatever. And then we got there and we played right before them, and no one even had heard us before, and like we're already buying our merch before we even hit the stage. And I think there was like 800 people like packed into that place, and I just remember like we played and like a huge circle pit broke out, and I was like, this is awesome, and then they played and it went nuts, and what was the song that you and me got up and sang with them? It was a Cox Bar song, right?
I played the All Style No Substance song guitar with them, and then I don't remember which one you sang with them, but I played guitar on one of the songs.
I thought you and me got up. Maybe you got up there and played, and I got up there and sang. But I thought we both got up and sang. Either way, all I remember is like, I don't remember if it was just me, if I took you down with me. But like, as soon as
you fell hard.
I fell. Yeah.
I've done that before too. I remember at the Paris Theater big show, and I remember thinking, cool, I'm jump up on the monitor, look all cool. I went to jump off, and I went bam, flat on my back. Yeah, I think so. Then we got back together in 2015 to do a 10-year reunion show. Yep. We played at a cool spot, but small venue, and it sold out, which was awesome that many people still cared and came, and it was a really good time.
I believe
And
I believe still that we were the fastest band to ever sell at that venue. Like it's like sold out like that. I mean, it's only 100 people or whatever, but
yeah, well, but 10 years later, right? Pretty rad. And because we sold out that venue, we ended up doing a second reunion show. So we did twice that year, and then that was it. Right, that was the last time. Zach's still in a bunch of different bands and has played music pretty much the whole time. I haven't, but I am considering or wanting to do it now. But I'm flirting with playing bass instead of guitar, since I'm not an amazing guitar player, and I remember having fun playing the bass. So I don't know.
yeah.
But yeah, those were kind of the highlights, really. I think one takeaway for me, like I said, that's crazy to think of is, here we are on tour pre, any sort of new modern convenience. So like when we were booking our tours, you and I were going to AAA and getting maps. Remember once MapQuest came out, like that was a game changer. We had a binder where
we had the binder full of it.
But if you got off track, you still had to pull
fucked.
over and find a payphone and call somebody and get directions. We got lost often. At the time too, most of our music, we were made mixtapes and cassettes, so we had a big cardboard box stuffed full of mixtapes, and we were just, jamming to these cassette tapes. And then I said too, like even booking was, we're making phone calls, writing letters. This was, social media wasn't really a thing. So, how much everything's changed is pretty crazy. I don't know how it would have worked out for us, since we got in a lot of trouble a lot of places we went, and advertising we were coming back might have been bad. I don't know. But we got away with it. I remember in Cleveland, probably 4 months before that, we had beat up that band Integrity in Portland, and they were a Cleveland band. And I just remember thinking, man, it was all well and good when you come to our town, but this is going to be rough. But
there was definitely a time for like those last tours where there was always rumors getting back to us. Remember, they'd be like, oh, the Escaped are coming, and we'd hear some whack skinhead crew was going to take us out or something like that. Like it kind of got that way towards the end.
Boston was one that I recall for sure. There was some Hammerskins that allegedly were going to come trying to disrupt the show, and they got pulled over on the way, or they would have showed up. It was one of those things, but it was still message boards were starting to be a thing. Internet.
I remember like Denver and I think Atlanta were two places where people were like kind of like not happy with our antics prior.
Yeah, Denver, we had it coming, and then. So we're pushing an hour, so we'll get close to wrapping up. But let's touch a little bit, because we haven't really talked about this a bunch ever. I mean, camera or not, about really why we broke up. So there's probably different perspectives from everybody, right? I think I've talked about it on some of my other podcasts, but I've kind of always gone through different mental health stuff. And I think at the time I was just lost and depressed and confused. I was a kid, right? I remember thinking that a lot of people liked our band because they liked us, but I didn't think anyone liked our band. I was in that thing where like, oh, they're our friends, but we suck. And, just kind of a weird headspace. We had, or in the gang we were in, we had just beaten up the guys from Madball, which is, their crew is a very well-known big crew, especially in the music scene. And because of that, we got, Lars pretty much just ghosted us after that. Any of those contacts we had in Hellcat dropped off. Even drop kick at the time. I mean, people started kind of distancing themselves from us. So, that was part of an issue too, is, now we're considering, do we have to tour with security, and, things are going to change. And then, like I said, my mental health. And then I think another part of it too is, man, we pushed it hard. We pushed it really hard for 3 or 4 years. And like I said, we were living together for a lot of it. So, you go from best friends, being mad at each other, back to best friends. Like I said, we were kind of fighting each other back then. Even at that time too, we were getting into writing, so I was kind of like getting away from that skinhead scene. Yeah. And I think the biggest part for me was I was really considering trying to join the military. Because remember, I tried a bunch of branches, and with my criminal record and tattoos, they wouldn't let me in. But the National Guard strung me along that I was in. And what kind of burnt us on that is I got Carter all excited about it, and I brought Carter to meet my recruiter, and he got in. Yeah. So we put out that TKO record album, and then, man, I'm pretty sure we had just released it, and we were at the practice space. But I remember getting the call that Carter was in, and Carter was joining the Army. So I think that played a part in it too. After the revolving door of musicians and stuff, I didn't really want to do kind of another lineup. It was
hard. I mean, there was so many times where we would just get a new member, like it'd be like, all right, we got to record an album, or we're leaving for tour in 2 days. Get this guy, and then we'd be like, it'd be with someone who we weren't even really friends with. you know, and stuff like that, or just someone who
Remember
didn't gel.
Coleman? We drove to Montana to pick Coleman
Yeah.
up, listened to him play guitar. He was good, so he fit in. He jumped in the van, learned the songs from the back seat of the guitar,
Yeah.
and we literally hit the road on tour the next day.
Yeah, yeah, and I think
that stuff happened a lot.
Not being able to have a solid lineup of people who are all on the same page definitely played a part. You know what I mean? Like, and especially, and all of us, even me and you, you know what I mean? Like, there was just like the Rose City hardcore era of us was like a different vibe that I would have wanted to do. But like, I still like that. I can still listen to it and be like, oh, it's a good song. I was talking about like at the time, there was like
right
differences, you know what I mean? And then I think that's what was a bummer about it, though, is it really seemed like we came together on our differences on that last TKO EP.
I agree. It was the best recording we did. It was the only one that really wasn't rushed. You know, like Rose City Hardcore, there were so many things I wanted to go back and fix. Or even same with Escape Generation. I honestly can't even listen to a lot of those because I'll hear the mistakes and it'll bother me.
I know all the time, like, man, I can't believe we let it out like that. But it's like we just didn't.
We were on the hustle. You know, we were on the hustle. And when you're paying by the hour and you don't have a lot of money, you just kind of got to deal with it. You know, we didn't have that whatever other people have there where you can take 6 months to record an album. We record albums in 2 days. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Because it is a bummer. Like songs like No Pity in Rose City and like Escape Generation and stuff, like just great songs, you know what I mean? Like, and we redid some, like especially No Pity, we redid on Rose City Hardcore, and it's a really bad version of it. The timing's just off on it.
Yeah, and I think we were a really good live band. We had a ton of great energy, and I don't think we ever captured that in our recordings.
No, that was for sure our pro and con is we were a great live band and never got it right on the studio, probably.
Right. And I think that was part of it too, is like I said, I know I was struggling kind of mentally with a lot of it, but some of it too was like we're kind of at this make or break moment. Like, okay, this is all we're doing, and it's either we keep doing this or we hang it up. And with Carter leaving and some of us, we were getting older. Now we're 25, 26. Some of us, you know what I mean? It was kind of we didn't.
And there was
the way we do things is we weren't going to be half-assed. You know, we were either going to be all in or all out, which is a blessing and a curse. But that's how I've always been. So
if we kept it going, it would have been you and me and Chris with a continuous like revolving door of like people around us. You know what I mean? Because Chris probably never would have stopped either. You know?
Right. Oh, for sure. I agree. We probably would have got Tony back at some point, which would have been a whole different nightmare. But very likely. So I mean that was always kind of my takeaway on why we split up, and I take most of the all the responsibility on that. But I just ended up from booking the shows and I was super strict and I ran things really hard, and I think I just burned out, dude. That's why I didn't do that last show or that last tour, and it's just kind of how it played out.
Yeah, I remember it being bummed about it and stuff, but and you and me it wasn't long, but we didn't talk for a little bit after that. Right. And, but I was just bummed. I was like, cause I loved that. I just loved being in that band. You know what I mean? No matter what was going to happen, I wasn't going to quit. You know what I mean? I was just going to do it.
And we were best friends, man. I mean, we are best friends, but I mean, the band itself was best friends. We were just, like I said, we were young kids living our best lives looking back, man.
Okay. And, but yeah, I just think I remember it happening and just kind of being thinking well, I want to keep playing. This sucks. And then I don't even know how, eventually we just kind of one day we were in a room together again and it was just nothing. Hey, we're best friends still and we're just not in that band anymore. Whatever, you know what I mean?
Right.
It wasn't too big a deal, you know what I mean?
I do feel bad for Mark, man. I think Mark took a big risk, or not a risk, but either way, he put our album out under the pretext that we were going to be working as hard as we did before. We were touring and promoting the album, and then I had to call and tell him we broke up. And Mark being the rat
tours and stuff, we definitely screwed Mark on that one for sure.
Yeah, and Mark being the cool dude he was like, man, I get it, I understand, and he was really cool about it. But that is one thing. Sorry, Mark, we love you, but that is one thing that always bothered me about how we broke up is that we did burn Mark for sure. But a lot of the guys continued on and played bands. Like you've been in other bands. Tom's played in other bands. Chris was playing for a while. Tony was in bands, and I mean, he probably still is. I don't know much what Tony's gotten into these days. And then sounds like Carter made a life out of the Army, right? I think he's still active in the military, as far as I know.
Yeah, he's the only one that I haven't talked to since the band broke up. Like everybody else, I've kept in touch with here and there, but. We weren't really on speaking terms in the end anyway, and that was just how it went down.
I think joining the military sounds like it worked out well for him. So if that worked out, cool. I'm happy for him too. But It feels
Yeah,
like,
the
you know, like I
most
said,
fun
either
guys
playing
to talk to
music
them.
or
What's that?
I said, yeah. So like I said, you know, he ended up doing that and everyone else kind of started playing music. And then, you know, I got into the club scene stuff and then just kind of life happens, right? You get older and then once you had like I guess Brian could have told us years ago, the guitar player, once you're in a serious relationship or you get kids or whatever, all of a sudden you can't leave for 2 months at a time.
Yeah.
Get a good job or whatever. But I think we lucked out. I think we did it in a time that we were able to do it. Like I can't imagine doing it for the money we did now.
Right. And plus, well, I mean, there's just a lot of great things about it that I would say I walked away from. I mean, one, we were part of a great period of punk rock. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Just some great bands, and we got to play with them and do those shows, and that was awesome. Walked away with it though in the end with some of like the greatest friendships, you know, that like I'll ever have. You know, like me and you.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that. Let everyone know about the Up the Punks annual thing that you guys do.
Oh yeah, you know, like so even some of the for the last we you know we had to stop the last 2 years because COVID, but we're actually it starts again. Our official 6/1 will be in November. I'm going down to Austin, so every year
we are going.
What's that?
Said we are going.
You going?
All right.
But every year, like me and like some of the guys from the Chrome Bombs, Complete Control, Global Threat, some of the like Rick from the Casualties, just like and just a lot of the other people we met in those early like 2000s punk rock days of touring and staying with each other and all that stuff. We still make sure that we get together once a year in a different city and we rent Airbnb for the weekend and we just all hang out and party together and you know, laugh about all the same dumb stuff we've always laughed about.
For sure. What about any plugs you want to put out there, like so your social media or what bands you're in now? Anything you want to promote?
Yeah, if you guys want to check out, I'm in a rock band now. I sing and I play bass for it called Dead Feather. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and we've got 3 singles out that it's on all social media platforms, or not social media, digital platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, whatever. It's out there.
Awesome.
And,
cool. Cool. Yeah. It's kind of a, you know, just started this Mondays with Mooch thing a while ago. And so far it's pretty much been like motorcycle club related. So this is kind of a cool detour that's still, you know, my life and my history and it's a lot of overlap too. Cause like I said, you know, you and I started riding around the same time and done some motorcycle stuff together too. So I hope all you guys that listen for the club stuff liked this stuff as well. And then my last plug is, you know, I would like to give shout outs to my sponsors, but a cool one that's meaningful to this is DB Gear is one of our main sponsors. They make all my merch for, you know, pretty much everything we do. Super supportive, but DB Gear is for Dylan Burns, and Dylan Burns played bass for The Escaped for a few years and did some tours with us. So DB Gear is very close to us, and you know, please make sure you check them out. Weightlifting gear, merch, anything you need printed, made, they do it all. So look them up. Well, cool. Well, that was awesome, Zach. I really appreciate you sitting down with me today. We rambled on for almost an hour and a half.
Yeah, man, I had a blast. Thanks for having me on here.
For sure. I love you, bro. And hopefully we can hang out soon. I'll try and make that trip.
Love you too, brother. I'll talk to you soon, man.
Later.